What's good, John Nation? Y'all already know what it is. Big job back. And I got a couple guests.
It's Chad Lawson right here, aka Young Drippy, upcoming rapper Frankfurt, Kentucky.
And Chase Austin. Yeah.
What's him again?
Yeah, Kurt's back there sleeping. I don't give a fuck about him. Oh my god.
Alright, DJ, tell me what we're gonna be reacting.
Alright, we'll be reacting to the top 20 childhood conspiracy theories.
Alright, let's get to it.
This video contains theories about possible explanations for the origins of children television shows and more. Any material used in this video is for educational and reviewing purposes under fair usage.
I can't hear
No copyright infringement intended.
Growing up, my childhood was jacked up with awesome TV shows. And for every children's television show, there's usually a theory for why the show exists and what it could be based on. Some theories are clever and fun to wonder about. Others are eerily convenient and make a lot of sense. And today, I'm going to count down my favorite cartoon conspiracy theories. Just a reminder that these are just theories. And while some might find them stupid and pointless, I think they're cool and interesting. It's fun to overthink. With that being said, here are the top 20 cartoon conspiracy theories. This channel has no regard for your childhood. It will be ruined. Number 20. Samurai Jack and the Powerpuff Girls are in the same universe. Not much is said about this theory, other than some comparisons. Like how Professor Utonium and Samurai Jack look really, really alike. There seems to be a post-apocalyptic version of the city of Townsville in Samurai Jack. And this sign of the dog from the Powerpuff Girls in both shows. Coincidence? I think not. Maybe some fatal fight between the Powerpuff Girls and some enemy almost destroyed the world. Then the professor, being a scientist, pulled a Captain America on us and made himself a super samurai. We don't know, but it's an interesting theory with interesting evidence. Number 19. Inspector Gadget. Dr. Claw is the real Inspector Gadget. The show never bothered to explain some things. Like, how does this idiot of an inspector have robotic parts in his body? Must be an accident, right? And Dr. Claw, the main antagonist, seems to have a strange, damaged voice and a metal hand, as if it's an artificial limb. The theory is that Dr. Claw was once the original Inspector Gadget, but died. Penny, his conveniently smart niece, revived him as a robot. This is why even though she always gets captured, Penny never really gets hurt, being the only thing that Dr. Claw really cares for. Number 18. The Tick is some kid's sick imagination. This theory explains that the Tick is really just a kid with a blood disease that he got from a tick, fantasizing about being a superhero whilst in bed. The Idea Men are really the action figures he was stuck playing with. The plant-based villain, Alcide, could be based on the plants he sees from his outside window. Chair-faced Chippendale is, of course, a chair. Arthur represents the boy's divorced father. Since he is an accountant flying around in a white suit, the boy never really knew him that well. American Maid is the boy's mother, which is why, even though she's super sexualized, the tech never really shows any interest in her. Number 17. Scooby-Doo post-depression theory. The original Scooby-Doo series takes place after a horrible economic depression. Everything is abandoned and falling apart, and all the villains are people who would normally be really respected. Professors, museum creators, celebrities, who have fallen into hard times just like everybody else. How many times have the gang helped someone not go out of business? Number 16. The Smurf represents Nazis. The creator of the Smurfs, Pierre Clifford, was born in Belgium in 1928, which means that he spent his childhood under Nazi occupation. First, the Smurfs' common enemy is the sorcerer Gargamel, whose plan is to steal the Smurfs and turn them into gold. With his big nose and money-hungry attitude, he could be a Jewish stereotype. He also has a cat named Azrael, whose name comes from Jewish mysticism. The Smurfs are also seen wearing all white, representing the clothing of KKK members, except for Papa Smurf, who wears red, just like the KKK leaders would wear. The Smurfs being all blue represents Aryan purity, the idea of everyone having blue eyes and blonde hair. Number 15. The Recess Conspiracy Theory. This theory details the deaths of all the children, and how their spirits still linger and play in the playground of 3rd Street School. One of the more longer theories that I won't be getting too into, it's definitely a creepy one that you should check out. The link for it will be down in the description below. Pretty much, all the kids died in different ways, and now their resting place is the playground. Number 14. Dora the Explorer has Down syndrome. Dora suffers from heterocephalus, a condition that causes her head to be larger than usual.
Bro, they did not just say, I think this.
Did you say Dora had Down syndrome?
Yeah, he said Dora the Explorer had Down syndrome. Wait, hold on. It says hydrocephalus.
She talks more loudly than others, a common trait for kids with Down syndrome. Boots is Dora's guide animal that helps protect her when she is wandering off. The yellow bracelet that Dora is seen wearing is actually a medical alert bracelet that tracks wandering children, just in case they get lost. Oh, man! Number 13. Donald Duck suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. This theory explains why Donald has a high temper and anger issues. It's because of him being drafted into the war, which is true. In the earlier comics, he would get flashbacks of his time in World War II.
Hello, please.
Before the war, this comic strip shows Donald trying to catch whoever is stealing out of his icebox using a camera. After the war, in a comic strip with the recycled story, he instead goes apeshit on his nephews. In order to prove that Donald is sleepwalking and stealing out of his own icebox, his nephew set up firecrackers to wake him up. Suddenly, Donald gets an extreme World War II flashback.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you get it? Because the war is loud.
Number 12. The Fairly Odd Parents. Cosmo and Wanda represent antidepressants. Cosmo and Wanda are metaphors for Zoloft and Prozac. They're there when Timmy's problems start showing up. They're there only for as long as he needs them. It must be secret. And when Timmy misuses their quote-unquote magic, there are some consequences. Number 11. Adventure Time. The post-apocalyptic theory. Adventure Time takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting, as revealed by its creator. 1,000 years after the Mushroom War, new life appears and mutations cause new creatures. In fact, Finn is the last human on Earth, and Marceline the Vampire Queen and the Ice King are survivors of the Mushroom War. Broken pieces of cars, buildings, and other indications of civilization can be seen throughout the show, most notably the broken missiles in the opening sequence. The Earth is also shown to have a huge chunk of it missing. In one of the newer episodes, titled I Remember You, a flashback is shown of a world completely destroyed when Marceline was just a kid, being taken care of by the Ice King. Number 10. Powerpuff Girls, the imaginary theory. What if the Powerpuff Girls never had superpowers? They were just pretending all along. After all, they are just little girls. This theory believes that Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup are just regular kindergartners. Mojo Jojo is actually their older stepbrother, who is sexually interested in them. Fuzzy Lumpkins is a strange neighbor who plays pranks on the girls. The Gang Green Gang are a group of normal, ordinary teenagers, the big kids around the block, who would play pretend with the girls and went along with their heroic imaginations. Him is the girl's uncle, the brother of Professor Utonium. The reason he's evil is because he's homosexual, and the professor was really against that, saying that homosexuality is the devil's work and that he's evil. The professor would never call him by his real first name, and simply told the girls to stay away from him. Finally, the mayor is the girl's grandpa, and he would play along with the Powerpuff Girls, calling them for help and thanking them for their imaginary heroic efforts. Courage the Cowardly Dog. The show is all from Courage's point of view. One theory on Reddit proposes that all the so-called monsters are just normal people, but from a dog's point of view, they're monsters. Courage actually lives in a normal farm, but believes that him and his family live in the middle of nowhere because his owners never walked him, so he doesn't know what's out there. This theory also explains why Muriel and Eustace never realize the terrible danger they're in. Eustace is also the one who seems to get screwed over at the end of every episode, even though he's completely fine and has no memory of the incident in the next episode. Number 8. The Flintstones takes place in the future. In the 1987 film The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, Elroy makes a machine that sends the Jetsons to the future when the machine suddenly screws up at the last second and instead sends them to the past, where they meet the Flintstones. But what if the machine actually did work, and they did meet the Flintstones in the future? Now, the setting for the Flintstones doesn't look like jack shit of the future. But what if it takes place in a post-apocalyptic future that's reverted man back to the Stone Age? But how did this future end up so bleak and primitive? Remember, the Flintstones aired from 1960 to 1966, the height of the Cold War. Maybe some nuclear bomb.
Have you watched Jetsons?
Yeah.
That's the mom.
What do you mean?
Look, right here. That's the mom.
But what if it takes place in a post-apocalyptic future that's reverted man back to the Stone Age? But how did this future end up so...
That's the mom. The Jetsons, the show with
Yeah, I know the Jetsons.
You know, have you seen that show?
It's like the future. It's like the future.
Yeah, that's the mom right here.
So you saying
But that's the wife. That's the wife, right? That's the wife. But that's his wife. That must mean that's his mom.
bleak and primitive. Remember, the Flintstones aired from 1960 to 1966, the height of the Cold War. Maybe some nuclear bomb between the Soviets and Americans was what destroyed the world. And because of nuclear radiation, the Jetsons had to live away from the surface and up in the sky, while the Earth healed. When the Earth finished healing, the Flintstones took place, trying to rebuild civilization. This would explain why they celebrate Christmas before the birth of Christ, and all the references, like the Beatles. It also explains why most of their primitive technology, like birds playing record players, dinosaur-powered factories, their money and their banking system, exists. They're just rebuilding what once was. Number 7. SpongeBob SquarePants and the 7 Deadly Sins. The main characters of SpongeBob SquarePants are all based on the 7 Deadly Sins. Patrick is sloth, the sin of laziness and the unwillingness to act. Wrath is being hateful or angry, like Squidward. Greed is Mr. Krabs, always caring about money more than anything. Plankton is envy, the sin of jealousy. He is always jealous of Mr. Krabs and his success, and always tries to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula. Gluttony is when you eat too much food, which belongs to Gary. There's a running gag of SpongeBob saying, "Don't forget to feed Gary," and "I gotta feed Gary," alluding that Gary eats a lot. Pride is Sandy. She is really proud of who she is and where she comes from. Finally, the last sin is lust, which is defined as giving excessive love to everyone, obviously belonging to SpongeBob. Number 6. Pinky and the Brain. Pinky is the genius, and the brain is insane. Each episode goes like this. Brain comes up with an idea, Pinky makes an observation, but Brain ignores it. But Pinky ends up being right, and the Brain's plan fails. In the second episode, Brain builds a robot suit to compete in Jeopardy, but loses because he didn't know the answer to a question that Pinky had answered correctly. Also, Pinky can read, and the Brain can't even spell his own name. But the most conclusive evidence comes from the episode The Smarts. Brain builds a machine that tells him why his plans keep failing. The machine concludes that it is all Pinky's fault, so the Brain then builds a smart machine to turn Pinky into a genius. However, Pinky's personality isn't changed at all. In fact, he finds an error in the Brain's calculations, and the real reason behind the Brain's failed plans is because of the Brain himself. Finally, the theme song says, one is a genius and one is insane. And, well, Pinky's name is first. Number 5. Ed, Edd, and Eddy, the Purgatory Theory. This theory claims that the kids of...
Are y'all straight?
Dude.
You can sit down right
Trying to take the whole
Bro, y'all straight, bro?
Oh, bro. Trying to take the whole fucking sheet.
Look, you
You can't do that and use a sheet.
Bro, watch out.
can see?
Dude, we can't use a blanket. We gotta use a sheet.
Dude, this is not a fucking cheese.
Yes, it is. That's what they use the sheet for. See?
What the fuck you talking about?
You're not gonna be able to use it as a blanket, bro. Bro, chill, because I'm laying down here. Bro, I'm saying I'm laying down though. You're not gonna go fucking say I'm stealing your ass and you're gonna go fucking
Bro,
move.
this is what I'm talking about here, bro. We can't just get a
Bro,
video.
chill, watch out.
We can't just get a video done right here. Like, bro, just shut the fuck up and watch the video. Now.
Bro, this video sucks.
Bro, what the fuck you mean, bro?
It's a fucking cartoon.
You the one picked it.
Cartoon fucking...
She's picked it.
Cartoons.
Cartoon
I don't
conspiracy
have a
theories.
discussion video.
Discussion video?
Yeah.
Hey, discussion video coming next. Stay tuned.
Ed and Eddie are all dead and living in the cul-de-sac, which is really purgatory. Each kid represents a different era of time. Rolf died a farmer in the 1900s. Johnny died in the 1920s, when owning a piece of wood as a friend was reasonable. Eddie died during the Great Depression, which is why he's so obsessed with money. Ed and Sarah died together in a car crash in the 1950s, when women were becoming stronger and zombie movies and comics were popular. Naz died a flower girl in the 1960s, with not much regard to her parents. Double D, on the other hand, had strict parents, and died with them when one of his experiments went wrong. Kevin died on his way to the hospital after his drunk, abusive father beated him in the 1990s. Jimmy died from leukemia in the 2000s, and because of that, he was never really around any of the other kids. The Kanker sisters are demons, sent from hell to torture the lost souls of the kids who never made it to heaven. Which is why they possess seemingly impossible abilities, like being able to pop up anywhere and growing in size. Number 4. The Rugrats are all figments of Angelica's imagination. Angelica existed, but most of the Rugrats themselves didn't. Chucky died alongside with his mother, which is why Chaz is a nervous wreck all the time. On a trip to Paris, Chaz married a hooker named Kira, who had a daughter named Kimmy. Tommy died as stillborn in the 2000s. That's why his father Stu was always making toys in the basement. It was his way of coping with the loss of his only son. The DeVilles had an abortion in 2001, and Angelica didn't know whether the baby was a boy or a girl, thus creating the twins, Phil and Will. And all grown up, Angelica was a schizophrenic and addicted to acid. The acid would bring back her memories of the infants she imagined. Angelica's real mom died of an overdose when Angelica was born, and Drew married a gold-digging whore whom Angelica idolized, believing she was her real mom.
That was number 3.
However, Angelica had an idea of what her mom really looked like from this doll she would always carry around. Angelica died of an overdose when she was 15, following in her mother's footsteps. The only 2 children who actually existed were Dill and Susie. Angelica would frequently hit Dill, causing his head to deform and him to suffer brain damage. Susie was Angelica's only friend growing up, and was entertained by her stories of how she came up with the babies. When Angelica died, Susie created the show Rugrats, based off of Angelica's imaginations. Number 3. Winnie the Pooh. Everyone is an example of a common psychiatric disorder. Winnie the Pooh has an eating disorder, explaining why he's always eating honey. Piglet has anxiety and is constantly afraid of everything. Tigger has ADHD and can't concentrate well. Rabbit has OCD, a disorder that causes excessive thoughts and compulsive tendencies. Owl has narcissistic personality disorder, believing that he is the smartest animal. Eeyore has depression, which is why he's always so down and gloomy. Finally, Christopher Robin is the only human and is the only one who can see and communicate with all these characters, because he has schizophrenia. Number 2. Pokemon. Ash's coma theory. Have you ever noticed that everything in Ash's world is relatively normal up until he gets struck by lightning in the first episode? There's a theory that Ash ended up in a coma after the incident. This would explain why he's always 10 years old. Why even though he travels long distances, he never travels by bike, having developed a fear of them. Why there are Nurse Joys and Officer Jennings everywhere. They were at Ash's hometown, and are his way of making him feel safe. And why, despite placing high in Pokemon leagues and conquering the Battle Frontier, whenever Ash enters a new region, no one has heard of him. It also explains why all of Ash's fascinating adventures can happen without him getting in any serious trouble or getting hurt. All of the main characters represent a different aspect of his life, and it's up to Ash to come to grips with what has really happened to him. And the #1 biggest cartoon conspiracy theory is subliminal messages. Rewatching some of my favorite cartoons, I never noticed any of the dirty jokes in them. Like how Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life worked in a hotline, or when SpongeBob made a prison rape joke.
Look, doubloons! Don't drop them.
But it even goes deeper than that. Conspiracy theorists have long believed that the Illuminati are the ones behind the September 11th attacks, and have foreshadowed it in our television programs. While it is true that our brain can process thoughts unconsciously, are our cartoons being riddled with subliminal sexual messages?
Here's my point.
While this conspiracy theory doesn't explain the cartoon's origin, or isn't downright believable, it ties every cartoon together, and involves something much, much bigger.
A discussion.
Yeah.
No video. It's not a reaction video.
What do you mean?
Like, we're just recording and discussing.
What?
Alright, so, what do you think about that?
Well, that's it for the video. Actually, it was probably like 2 or 3 of them that was actually really good.
I like the Winnie the Pooh one.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh actually, that made a lot of sense.
The SpongeBob one kind of did, but not really.
Kinda, I don't know. It was a lot of them was corny.
Yeah.
But,
it wasn't that good of a video, though, honestly.
like this video.
Subscribe.
Yeah, definitely subscribe.
Like, comment.
Comment what I should react to next.
Hit that like button. Pound that shit.
Alright, yeah.